Hello, my name is Melissa from Hyssop Ministries, and today I'm going to talk about soul fragmentation. What is soul fragmentation? It's also known as dissociation. It's when a part of your soul breaks off or dissociates from the presenter, the host, or the core of a person due to a traumatic event or consistent traumatic events. So what I mean by that is it's all to do with different, you could say, aspects of you as a person, depending on the traumatic event that's happened to you. For example, right now, I am the presenter speaking to you, but I'm also the core. I'm actually a core part from me from childhood that is actually talking to you as well. And I'm also classified as the host. I'm 3 in 1. But if you're someone with dissociation, you're not always the same. Sometimes the presenter and the host are not the core. And yeah, they're actually separated because of dissociation, hence why I've got all those 3 names in there. It commonly occurs in childhood before 12 years of age when the brain is still developing. Severity of the dissociation is more mild when the adult brain is developed later on in life. Basically, what we find when it comes to dissociation, also known as soul fragmentation, is when majority of the actual damage is done before people are 12, which is when the brain is actually developing. It's in a very young state. And so a lot of our basically, which I'll get into it more, basically our personality kind of gets stopped in growing up maturity wise and gets stagnated and stuck in that position of time while it's still developing. And it's one of the reasons why and, you know, if this traumatic event happened at this particular time, you will actually have a young part of you traumatized, stuck at that age until that trauma basically is resolved later on in life, which sometimes can take a very long time because the body needs to be ready to actually process that emotion. And that doesn't happen right away. So in Job 19:2, it says, "How long will you torment my soul and break me in pieces with your words?" In the Strong's, that actual word of soul means nefesh in Hebrew, which is a soul, a living being, a life, a self, person, desire, passion, appetite, and emotion. One thing we're noticing massively in inner healing is that there is a massive tie between emotions and soul fragmentation. And it's usually, again, like I said just a moment ago, connected to childhood before the age of 12 years old. And yeah, as you can tell, even the Bible is agreeing with this, what we're finding, which I'm not surprised. Usually it's one of those things where we need to find the scripture in the Bible to explain what we're actually experiencing in the real world, because we see it in the real world and we go, God, what is this? And then he shows us through his word. What are soul parts? So they are parts of your soul which hold the emotions, the thoughts, the feelings of the traumatic event they experienced and survived. Soul parts get stuck in the time of the event and are commonly seen as children and therefore will act like a child and talk like a child. These soul parts that are being created basically from dissociation, from trauma in childhood, these soul fragments that are being created from that horrible thing that happened to the person, we call them soul parts. That's the basic way of describing it. They're parts of a soul that have broken off. And yeah, depending on where you go, people have different names for them. Some people will call them inner child. Some people will call them soul fragments. Some people will call them soul parts. Some people will call them alters, as in alternate personalities. You will get a variety of different names. And you'll notice that they're always connected to your emotions, your thoughts, and your feelings. And what I mean by when I'm saying here that you'll see them as children is because they are literally parts of you at a younger age that got basically stuck with a problem and got kind of like stopped in time. And therefore they never really grew up and actually became an adult. And therefore, yeah, you're going to start to hear them, see them, and they're even going to talk like you as a little child, which is very interesting. So in terms of trauma and it occurring before the age of 12 years old, it seems to be a massive connection between generational iniquity and intentional trauma by the kingdom of darkness to children to ensure that the generational curses fall on the family line. It looks like the enemy uses some sort of, you could say, legal right through the bloodline, sins of the forefathers, to inflict this on children when their brains are developing in order to cause soul fragmentation. And this occurs in everybody. So that's one of the things with soul fragmentation and dissociation. They're heavily connected to generational iniquity. So it's very, what's the word? I think one of the reasons why some of the deliverance ministries aren't getting to the mental health aspect is they haven't made that connection. But when you start to actually realize that generational iniquity is basically the explanation for soul fragmentation, dissociation, trauma, you'll notice that the more trauma that happens to children, usually these people have came out of very nasty occult iniquity bloodlines. So what is a traumatic event? A traumatic event is also known as emotional, mental, physical, or sexual abuse. This, as we know in the world, physical and sexual abuse are the common ones we're aware of, okay? Emotional and mental are the ones that are massively overlooked. A lot of simple things that happen to children when it comes to needs not being fulfilled are actually classified as traumatic to a child. Things like not getting affection, not getting safety, being shamed, manipulated, or controlled through fear, for example, to do whoever their caretaker's bidding. That could be parents, that could be teachers, that could be, I don't know, some guardian that's looking after the child. It could even be siblings, an older sibling. Any of this stuff can actually traumatize a child. I'll give you an example of emotional abuse, which is something that I went through. When I was 5 years old, I was in primary school and I was being bullied, I believe, by kids. I can't really remember all of it. All I remember is I was very, very upset and scared. And I went to the teacher to basically for protection. And the teacher told me there's no point in crying. As a little kid, that absolutely freaked me out. It made me incredibly sad. I remember crying and being, very upset about it. And basically what happened is I forgot about that memory, never really got resolved, that problem. And I grew up with that emotional pain. And then as an adult, when I actually got to remember that kind of emotional pain from childhood again, I actually went into muscle memory. So I actually relived it physically and had to overcome that actual sadness that I went through. So ever since I was a little kid, I was suppressing sadness. And now as an adult, I had to go and do some emotion work to actually get myself healed from that. Terminology. Triggers. Triggers happen when a similar traumatic event occurs like the previous one in childhood. The dissociated soul part will get activated or triggered to respond to the situation like it did when it was created. Switching is when the soul part takes over the presenter of a person by the trigger in order to protect the person from the traumatic situation. So what does this look like? So a trigger causes you to switch, and then the switch usually causes an outburst of emotion, or I would say as well, lack of emotion. People that zone out and don't respond when they're being bullied, I would suggest that also is dissociation. I'd say a good example with this one would be someone got triggered, they switched, and they suddenly got angry. That's something we see all the time. People that get angry, and sometimes they don't even know why they're angry. They're like, why am I angry? And they're angry because of some sort of pain they have from childhood that they never resolved, and they've got a soul part that's jumping in that spot because of that anger. So basically what happened to me in my example here is that every single time I was in a bad situation later in life, maybe in high school sometime or even primary school where I was being bullied in a big group, I would switch into that little girl that was sad, except I wouldn't cry. I would just be blank with no emotions. And I would be like a brick wall who just sat there and took the pain. It was really sad, but that's what was happening. and I would switch to that. And then after the event was done, the pain was done, all the horrible words were inflicted on me, I would switch back to me like nothing happened and move on with life. Degrees of fragmentation. So what I have found when you go into psychology and mental health, the more you learn about dissociation and the more you just learn about the current human condition in the world, you basically can't get away from dissociation. It's like everywhere. It's connected to a truckload of mental health issues, including just the average person seems to have some type of dissociation that's impacting their lives. And it's one of those things where I've decided to create 2 groups to show you the signs of what type of dissociation you're experiencing, and then so you have a better idea of what kind of, you could say, methods or goals or direction you can go in order to get healed from this kind of stuff that's happened to you in your life. So the first group I created was partial dissociation, and the second one is complete. But right now I'm going to talk about partial. So partial dissociation is when parts are connected to your presenter when triggered and switching occurs. You identify them as your emotions, not as a separate identity. You see them as in soulish dreams or night visions and hear them speak in your thoughts. So a few things that's really interesting when it comes to partial dissociation is that everybody has this, okay? Everybody's got partial dissociation. Partial dissociation, the best way to describe it is that a part of you has gone through some horrible thing as a child, and it's caused it to stagnate, to not grow and become fully mature for whatever reason. And usually it's connected to your emotions, like I've got listed here. It's usually what you are dreaming about. So your soul dreams are of these parts of your humanity, and they are literally the voices you hear that we call thoughts. Partial dissociation means that those parts of your soul are still connected to the core of you, the main part of your soul. They're not totally disconnected and wandering around anywhere. They're actually still connected to you. They can communicate with you and you communicate with them. Their thoughts are your thoughts, and all this other stuff. But what's happening is parts of them will be very young and immature and not fully grown up yet. And then other parts you'll be more mature and more grown up. So what is complete dissociation? It's separate identities with different ages, behaviors, interests, and sometimes genders. They're totally disconnected from each other, which causes memory loss or loss of time in daily life when switching between parts. And it's also known as emptiness of emotions and feelings. So complete dissociation seems to be massively connected to your soul parts no longer talking to each other. So in other words, a part of your humanity has chosen, in order to survive, I need to reject that other part of my humanity and disconnect it from me. And I need to make out whatever happened to that part of me in that period of my life. I need to forget that. And that's pretty much what dissociation does. It makes me forget what happened to me then, so that that is separated from me, so that I can live daily life and carry on with my life and do all the things I need to do. And I don't need to handle whatever that horrible thing was that happened to me, because I can't handle that right now. I'm mentally or physically not at a position in my life. I would say this is where the whole child thing comes into it. You're not quite developed enough mentally, and even your body is yet, to handle and process what happened to you. So your body says, I can't do that right now. I'm too young. I'm still growing up. So I'm going to reject that information, put that over there, and that part of me is going to handle that and hold that while I grow up, live life. And then when I get to a stage where I feel like I'm able to take on that actual truth of what happened to me, the body will start to remember. And this is where reoccurring dreams come from, and people start having nightmares and all these other things, because these soul parts are trying to show you what actually happened to you in childhood. That's what complete dissociation can do to people. Another example of complete dissociation I should explain too is that you will be somebody who, for example, has dreams, but in your dreams you're seeing yourself do things you would never do. If you're seeing yourself, like I was saying before, you're robbing something or you're killing somebody, you're an assassin and you've never murdered anybody before, then that is most likely a soul dream. You've got a soul part that's got an agreement with death, murdering, something like that. And it's probably a generational curse on your bloodline. Maybe you've got ancestors who were in the war, for example. Or maybe you've got their trophies or their medallions in your house. Whatever it is, there's something like that that's allowing that spirit to come and talk to you and make agreements with you. And it's doing that to your soul parts who've been hurt, traumatized in childhood. And you're seeing yourself now doing these evil things that you wouldn't have done, but you've somehow came into agreement with that through the sin and the trauma that you went through in childhood. So the next one is emptiness of emotions and feelings. So something we do when we have gone through a traumatic event, like I was saying before, we break off our communication with that part of our soul. And so that part of our soul then can actually come outside of our body and travel into realms of captivity. But this is what happens all the time. It doesn't have to do that though. It can stay inside your body and it can create a little inner world and it can live in that inner world. But that doesn't change the fact that there's still going to be a door there where the enemy can access that part of your soul and cause a lot of pain and problems and and do a lot of damage, unfortunately. So so complete dissociation is problematic, to put it simply. Everyone has soul fragmentation. The amount depends on open doors from generational curses and trauma experienced, especially in childhood. Partial and complete dissociated soul parts. The trauma can be as simple as a lack of safety from a parent as an infant or mother when pregnant, experiencing stress while child's in the womb. So soul fragmentation has got a lot to do with generational curses. So in other words, what I have found consistently so far when it comes to deliverance is that you need to have some very nasty generational curses on your bloodline in order to really open up the big and horrible nasty doors that people that are in a variety of cult groups are accessing and are participating in and are doing all their evil rituals and stuff like that. Now, that means for like somebody, for example, who's SRA, they're going to have to be born into bloodlines that have been practicing this stuff for a very long time. That's not always everyone's case. Some people just went through a lot of trauma in childhood, like domestic violence, and they can just have this soul fragmentation from that. But there's also other people who are just the average person, or even just a Christian who has not had the best upbringing in the world. Like I gave you my example of sadness as a little kid. That's a good example of how simple it can be, and but how traumatic that could be for a little kid. So it doesn't have to be something big and like massive like SRA, nor does it even have to be domestic violence. You can just have some horrible generational curse on your bloodline that has been coming down over the generations that no one yet has repented for, and therefore those particular spirits have a legal right to tempt whoever it is that's looking after you as a little kid to inflict this pain on you as a child. And that's how these generational curses come in. And then those demons try to make a sin agreement with you as a little kid so that they can actually make a covenant with you and continue on that curse on your bloodline. Now, there's more to it than that. I won't go into that now. Something for the future. So age and trauma patterns. So something that we're noticing, well, I'm noticing, the more and more I look into this and the more and more I study it, is there seems to be these two, almost like two groups, like I was saying before. There's partial and there seems to be complete. The most simple way I could describe it is it's the byproduct of the fall of Adam and Eve that's hit all of mankind. That's what dissociation seems to be looking like. And complete dissociation seems to be the byproduct of unresolved traumatic events from childhood that are being repressed because the human body doesn't know how to process it yet. It's not really at a stage in that particular person's life to process that pain yet. Or what's the other one? Pain or the shame or the guilt or the rejection or whatever it is that's caused that to be there. Usually when it comes to partial dissociation, you're aware of the trauma. So you remember the memory, like you might be dreaming about it all the time. Like, for me, I used to have nightmares about this stuff as a little kid. But my parents and everyone didn't know what to do about it. They probably, even as a child, I didn't even realize what was going on. To me, I thought I did the right thing, because I was told to not have feelings. So I don't understand why I'm experiencing all these bad stuff. What tends to happen is these little kid parts of you will attach themselves to an older part of you, because the event didn't just happen once. In other words, you might have gone through this horrible thing at 5, and then you went again through it at 7, and then you went again through it at 10, and you went again through it at 12, and then again at 15, and then 17. Okay, so you might have the younger parts are completely dissociated, but the older parts are actually awake. They're aware. They're partial. Okay, so you remember the adult ones, but you don't remember the original one that they're protecting. That's something that happens well with part and complete. You're going to see that they're connected. They're coming together connected. They're not always the same part. They're usually a group of parts. So it gets really sad. I know, I'm really sorry for the people out there that just realize this, because we've all got it. Everyone has it. We can't get away from it. It's part of the fall of Adam and Eve, unfortunately. It's something that Jesus came to heal us from. Praise God. But on that note, we have all these little parts of you. You've got ones from you from 6 and younger, all the way up to the age of whatever you are today. And if the trauma kept on going, it's just heaps of them. There's heaps of them, and they're all connected. And you might remember the older ones could be partially disconnected from you, and the younger ones could be totally disconnected. So the deeper inner healing work you do, the further back you go, the more freedom you're going to get, and the more healing you're going to receive. So it's one of those things where deliverance and inner healing is a journey. It's a big journey, because you don't realize quite how much damage has been done there until you start going on the path and actually go down that road. And yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of work. The enemy's had a lot of time to attack you, unfortunately. Not just you, but mankind. So with complete dissociated soul parts, they're usually under the age of 6 years old. That occurs from consistent traumatic events over a long period of time. You're usually totally unaware of the trauma that occurred. And DID and SRA characteristics are usually found. What I mean by that is that people that are under the age of 6 usually have some of the worst dissociation problems, as in children are very easily influenced by words, by what they're told to do by their parents, by what we see as society's norms. So if we're told that the way we're acting is inappropriate in the world, we can repress or reject that part of ourselves in order to fit in, because we want to be part of the normal people in the world. We don't want to be exiled. We want to be part of our family. We want to be part of our community, whatever it is. And in a little kid's view, we don't know how to do that besides saying, oh, that part of me is bad, so I reject that part of me, and instead I'm going to be this good part of me. And that means that we get dissociate ourselves, and those little aspects of ourselves hold all that pain. Usually when things like that happen, that little part of you tends to be the one that switches in and takes all the pain over your whole entire life. And if it's something that's like with complete dissociation, if you're like an adult now, you're a 30-something-year-old, maybe even older, and you still have parts of your childhood, for example, you don't remember, that's complete dissociation. You've got parts of your life that was very traumatic, and your body's not letting you remember that right now because it's not ready to handle that. And yeah, and basically that usually happens when it's happened multiple times over a consistent long period of time. And that's why if you've got a very long period of your life you don't remember, that's showing you how long that particular problem has been going on for. You can kind of see all the signs of this stuff when you start to understand what it looks like. You can see it in your own life. Thanks for watching. I hope this gives you a better perspective of soul fragmentation and dissociation and its connection to the Deliverance and Inner Healing Ministry, because it's all part of the journey on freedom. Till next time, God bless.